Hello, everyone. Welcome to this Memorial Day edition of Insecurity. We're going to name this episode Fido for the Fido Alliance, that we have a special guest to explain. We have John Salter coming back to us from Yubico, and he's going to explain to us this whole thing of what the Fido Alliance is and why we should be happy about it. So, hi, John.
Hi there, guys. Good to talk to you again.
And we have Tom. Tom's going to, again, explain all of this to me.
Hey, how's it going?
So I guess we should start off with the very obvious question, John. What is the Fido Alliance?
Well, it's interesting. The Fido Alliance was formed officially at the beginning of last year with a mission to make login, or the way they call it, authentication, but to make login simpler and more secure. And we get every week reports of problems with organizations that lose control of their secrets. And just last week we had eBay admitting to have lost 150 million of our email addresses and dates of birth and hash passwords and so on. And Fido was formed a year and a half ago to solve that problem, to actually create a new protocol that got rid of some of the real nasty issues with authentication.
And so simply what it looks like, and we have the document and I'll link it in the show notes, is you're trying to make the second factor the first factor, or have two-factor and go it's a hardware dongle, it seems like.
Well, let's start from the high level. The high level, we're trying to get rid of passwords, and passwords are technically a shared secret. You have your password, and the service that you're logging into also has your password in some shape or form, and that's a shared secret. And you prove you've got that shared secret, and the service lets you in. And what Fido is trying to do is to get rid of that shared secret. And there are well-known technologies that allow you to do things securely, like authenticate, without having a shared secret, and they're based on public key technology, where a service has your public key. You can then sign something, and they can validate that that signature can only have come from you. There is no shared secret in that environment, and what Fido is trying to do is to use that underlying technology, but avoid some of the pitfalls that and complexities that has really come about from all the other implementations of public key. PKI, or public key infrastructure, is incredibly complex, because what it tries to do is to solve both authentication and identity in the same set of protocol and standards, and that is a very difficult thing to bite off. What Fido has done is to say, well, actually, authentication, let's get that building block right, and then if we've got that building block correct, we can then do things like identity and other pieces on top of it. Fido was actually started by PayPal and a bunch of technology companies who wanted to solve this problem. And a little over a year ago, Google and Yubico joined the Fido Alliance to contribute a protocol that we had been working on together for a couple of years before then, and we call it Universal Second Factor, or U2F. And really, it's saying that if you are a service and you want to authenticate somebody, if that person has something that's strong, much stronger than passwords, then let's make use of that and allow them to use that to log in. And essentially what we're trying to solve here is to allow you to have one device. In our case, it's a YubiKey, but it could be your mobile phone, or it could be a range of other devices. One device that, if you can present in a secure way when you're trying to log in, allows you to do so without having to have long, complicated passwords. So the way we put it is, it's a pin and a touch. That's really what you need to do to log in the 21st century, and that is built upon all these strong cryptographic protocols. And I can show you some examples of what we mean, if that would help bring it to life.
Sure.
Yeah, I think that would be good.
Let me switch on my screen share here.
So if you don't know, while John is getting that up, if you don't know, we talked about this back in November, where Yubico is the company. YubiKey was this second factor device you stuck in. It was a hardware keyboard. And so with LastPass, you turn the setting on in LastPass, you type in your first factor, which is your password, your very long master password, and then it asked you, please tap your YubiKey. And with that, it put in this very long string of text, which was dynamic. It changed because LastPass had a YubiKey server, and that was the way to authenticate you. So,
okay, yeah, and let's to be clear here. What we're doing with Fido is inventing a new protocol. So this is futures. We expect to have Yubico expects to have products available on our site in the third quarter. So usually that means sometime in September. So we're talking a little bit in advance of services and hardware and other products being available. But the standard YubiKey is still out there, and lots of people still use it. There's some really good, really solid use cases for it. But this is something new which we believe will change. Really change the whole authentication landscape. So hopefully you can see my screen, and this is just
it's nice and clear, which is
good. This is just a little demonstration site that we have. It's the URL is public, so you can go there. But unfortunately, without a YubiKey with the right protocol, it won't do very much for you. But let's say I'm coming along. It's brand new. I want to register an account on a site, so I give them some sort of username. I'm going to put a PIN in. I'm going to choose 1234, and the PIN really is there as a way to protect your device if it were to come out of your control. So if you lose your device, you haven't lost your PIN and you haven't written your PIN on it, then you're okay. And you think about it like an ATM card. You put your ATM card in and you tap in your PIN. You're relatively happy with that security for giving you $100. So we're talking about the same sort of technology here. So I click on register, and what I get is a pop-up from the browser, and this is actually Chrome coming to me and telling me that the domain demo.yubico.com is trying to enroll me on the site. And if I turn on my camera here, so you will see, and I've put my YubiKey in a USB extension cable so I can show it up to the camera. So I don't know if you can see that. It's probably not in focus, but you can see it's winking, and we call it within the Yubico architecture. That's a wink, and that's indicating to me that I need to touch it. So I'll just go back to my screen share again. Show my screen share. So am I back on screen?
Yep.
So I just touch my YubiKey, and you'll see the pop-up goes away, and the registration is complete. And so, from a user experience point of view, no complex password rules, no complexity. I can create a new account on this site, Acme Inc., with as little friction as possible, and that's been really important for us. Just a pin and a tap, and you've done the registration. But what's happening underneath? What's happening underneath is that the YubiKey is a cryptographic device, and it is creating a brand new public-private key pair. And I'm sure you've talked about public-private keys in the past, but just to remember, with a public-private key, you share your public key. You can share it as wide as you like, and you keep your private key really, really secure and really secret. And what you can do with a public key is you can encrypt stuff that only the private key can decrypt. And what you can do with the private key is you can sign things that anybody who has the public key can validate that you have that private key. You've been able to sign that message. So what we're doing on the key in secure hardware that's tamper resistant, that's used in everything from smart cards that are used for access to defense establishments through to your credit cards. Same hardware. We call it a secure element. A new private public key pair is minted on the device. The public key is shared with the service. So there's no shared secret. The public key is public. It's fine. That's no problem to share with the service. And what I also do is, what the device also does is sign a challenge that the service, in this case Acme Inc., has asked me to sign. So it now has my public key. It has a signature. It can validate that signature comes from that public key. So it now is confirmed that only my device can now access that account on that server. So when I come back again, let me come back. I think my name was John. And 1, 2, 3, 4. I tap enter, and the browser now, it's not the server, but the browser detects all my Fido devices. It confirms to me the domain that I'm trying to access, and it's flashing the YubiKey. I won't show it again. You know what a flashing YubiKey looks like now. And I tap that, and then I'm logged in. So again, it's a simple username, PIN, and touch. And of course, most browsers will probably cache those so that you don't need to enter in those every time. So you can log in effectively with just a touch. So it really is that easy. Now let's say that I want to go onto my my mobile phone. I have an Android device here, and hopefully you can see the screen share of that. I've got the app from Acme that I can tap. I think I said my username was John, and oops, and my password was 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, because it's expecting a PIN, it just brings up a number keypad, and I don't know if you're like me, but actually getting my big fingers to get on the right targets when it's got a full keyboard is quite tough sometimes. So I hit go, and this time it says, now please tap your U2F device on the back of the phone, and that's because I'm using the NFC capability of the YubiKey. I tap it on the back of the phone, and there I am. I'm in to the Acme store. The account that I've registered on the Windows, I just go to my smartphone, and all I need to do is to tap in the username, PIN, and tap my YubiKey on the back, and then I'm in. So what we're really trying to show here is the user experience is really important for us. You know, it should be easier than putting in a password, and if it isn't easier, nobody's going to use it. And to date, the Fido Alliance, of which Yubico is a board member, and I in fact sit on the board of the Fido Alliance. You know, we've attracted not only Google and PayPal, but also Microsoft, Samsung, ARM, who design all the processors that all mobile devices use, Bank of America, MasterCard, Visa, so the financial services are really committed to it. Lenovo, the PC maker, RSA, indeed, who's the inventor of public key cryptography. All in all, there are 120 companies across all sectors, both vendors, both people who make stuff like Yubico, and also users, people like Bank of America, who are members of the Fido Alliance.
Well, that's some really cool tech you have there. My only concern is the possibility for phishing. So per service, you're creating a new public-private key pair. So it's not a shared secret between services. It's not a shared key pair.
That's right, and it's one of the privacy guarantees that you get with the Fido protocols is that two services can't identify you from the authenticator, in our case the YubiKey, the authenticator device, because a new public-private key pair is minted for each service that you register with, and that's quite an important guarantee in this day and age, that you don't want that information leakage, and yet we still want to achieve that you just want one device for the whole internet. You just, once we get Fido accepted across all the big service providers and everybody else realizes that actually it's a pretty easy protocol to implement, then you may have 30, 40, 50 different services that you're registered with, and a single device can securely authenticate you to each of those services, and yet those services can't use the device to track you across those services.
Okay.
Now, I wanted to ask, what happens, because one of the things I try to do at school is I'm trying to promote the idea of a YubiKey instead of a password or some sort of device like that, and they go, what happens in our case? You lose your YubiKey on the desktop, or you have such a big case that the NFC does not work through on the phone.
Okay, I mean, the two questions really there.
Yeah.
What if I lose my authenticator? I mean, service providers really have to figure that out.
Okay.
Most service providers, for example, allow you to, or the ones that we're talking to, allow you to register multiple devices. So you may have your YubiKey as one device, but you may also, I don't know, maybe use a fingerprint-enabled mobile phone, for example, as a second device. So as you have more services that you are using a FIDO authenticator with, you're probably going to want to have more than one authenticator against each of those services. One of the design criteria of the FIDO protocol is it's a two-party protocol. So it's you as a user and the service provider. There's no third party in the middle or behind it, and that has good things because it means it's very cheap to implement. That the protocols that FIDO are publishing will be unencumbered specifications. So all the members are asserting that they won't assert their patent portfolio against it, and that's really important. It's an open standard that anybody can implement. The downside of that is there isn't a third party in the middle that allows you to say go to one place and then disable your authenticator against all sites. So the service providers still need to handle account recovery. They have to do it today. They still need to do it, and they need to make sure that doesn't become the attack vector. Once the authentication piece is hardened, the bad guys will go look for the next softest piece. Service providers need to make sure they use best practice for account recovery and for authenticator disabling, so that doesn't become the next easiest attack vector.
Yeah, so we do that today with one-time links and email. So instead of forgot password, the link will now say I've lost my device or I don't have my device, something like that allows you to register either a new YubiKey or a new universal second factor device.
Yes, indeed. So that work still has to happen. Again, we're trying to bite off something that is solvable and that can be deployed industry-wide, and that's a fairly thin layer, but it's something that replaces this need for eBay. 150 million password or hash passwords were lost. Adobe we had recently. We had LinkedIn. We had Sony with their PlayStation database. The list goes on and on and on. It is not possible to secure large databases of secrets. It's just too attractive for the bad guys. So we have to move on from that being a core part of our authentication model.
Right. So instead, if eBay were using the FIDO protocols, if they got hacked and they lost their entire database, they just lose a lot of public keys, essentially.
Yeah. Which is not great because it means that they've been attacked. But it doesn't leave a door open for bad guys to authenticate as you.
Right. By definition, the public keys are public.
Public. Yep.
Which
something like it's in the name somewhere.
Yeah.
And then the other question I had,
cool.
Tom, John, the other question I had was with the phone. Is there
another
way without NFC or?
Yeah. No. Good question. Good question. And I think our view there, and we're a vendor here, so we have a vested interest. The Fido Alliance is what they call transport neutral, so that they're not, there's no definition it must be USB or must be NFC. What we think, and we've produced devices in our labs that we think have a really great user experience, is that Bluetooth, and particularly Bluetooth Low Energy, is a great transport for allowing you to have an authenticator like a YubiKey authenticating against smartphones and tablets. Bluetooth Low Energy seems to be the way that everything is going to go. NFC is out there on tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions, of Android devices, but there's no NFC on iOS devices, for example. When we next talk, I'm sure I will have a Bluetooth device that I can show you running against iOS, against your iPhone. And in fact, I've been using that earlier on today. So it's it's a real FIDO device that can authenticate over BLE.
Can you comment on was it Touch ID or Apple's insistence or whatever it is? Are we going to
Um,
see an Apple? Are we going to see Apple as part of this consortium anytime soon?
Nobody can speak on behalf of Apple. Apple will never say what they're doing and what they will and won't do. However, if you look at the Touch ID security review that Apple published back in February, you compare what they do to the Fido Alliance specifications that are now published. If you've got your helicopter hat on and get into deep crypto, you'll see that pretty much everything that they do is similar to the uses the same elliptic curve cryptography, for example, has the same principles with biometric devices should not. Let me just turn off Skype, otherwise that's going to annoy us.
Well, that's the last stronghold out there. You have 100 million iOS devices and 100 million Android devices, and if you don't make it for both, the problem exists.
Yeah. So our solution is to use Bluetooth, and then any iOS app that let's say a bank upgrades their iOS app, they can build in using libraries the Bluetooth low energy support. And maybe one day Apple built it into Touch ID, then it's there fundamentally on the devices that a few people have. Obviously only 5S currently have the Touch ID, but I'm sure further devices from Apple, both in the iPhone and the iPad, will fairly soon start to leverage that technology. I mean, they bought a company called Authentic for the fingerprint sensor. Authentic was very close to the Fido Alliance just before it was formed, so you can see that it's a small world here.
And I had a question. How would the Fido technologies compare to, if you've seen it, SQRL? It's a new project protocol by Steve Gibson, famously of the Security Now podcast series, which is supposed to replace passwords kind of in a similar way, but using QR codes as sort of the intermediary technology.
Yeah, I mean, the QR code is actually in Squirrel is a transport medium for getting a challenge to a cryptographic processor and which is then sent back to the server. Have a look at Squirrel's protocols. It's still it's using elliptic curve cryptography. It's using digital signatures to sign a challenge to prove that you're in control of the secret. It's based upon the same principle that there are actually the cryptographic protocols out there to support this. I think that, for example, there's no reason why we couldn't implement a Squirrel applet within our Yubico Neo device. That would be something that would be fairly straightforward, because there is a password in Squirrel, and that password is used to protect your private key. Our approach would be to say, well, that private key probably shouldn't be on a mobile phone. That private key should be in a hardware YubiKey. So, I'm sure once Steve has matured the protocol and we start to see some implementations, that it won't be long before you have the ability to store your Squirrel private key on your YubiKey. Remember that YubiKey and Yubico, the names, the root of those names is ubiquitous. We want to have a device that will do all sorts of cryptographic protocols, all sorts of authentication protocols, so you can have one device ubiquitous across all types of hardware and all types of services. I think what Steve, his challenge is getting the what we call relying parties. It's the eBays and Bank of Americas and Amazons and Apples and so on, to actually deploy services that use it. What Fido's managed to achieve over the last 12 months is to get 120 plus companies to sign up to Fido. I think that's for Squirrel to become more than an interesting exercise, he has to find a way to get adoption in the large service providers we all use.
I'm looking. Fido does not have Amazon, and I have a feeling that Amazon, at least on the buying side, not their server side, is going to be probably really hard to get.
I don't know whether an Amazon would want to join Fido or not. I suspect that anybody who's a late joiner to the Fido game will look at the deployments. If you look at the members, you look at Google, look at eBay, PayPal, Bank of America, Mastercard, Visa. If you're starting to get Fido devices out there, it becomes really very cheap and very simple to deploy the Fido protocols. Then why wouldn't you do it?
Yeah, and I agree. It would be a smart thing for them to do. Amazon typically, at least on the storefront side, has been very, very slow to implement different security protocols or more secure methods of authenticating. So, for instance, they don't, at least for the store side, I don't believe they have any two-factor authentication at all.
I think there's two-factor authentication in if you for things like S3 and so on.
Right.
But I think you're right, and where Amazon's coming from, of course, is that they want to have the minimum amount of friction between somebody logging on and being able to buy stuff. Because if you can't log on, you can't spend money.
Right.
And they have very, very effective server-side fraud detection and fraud management systems, and that I'm sure they would claim they will know if you're about to do a fraudulent transaction before you do. But again, it's if there's nobody with Fido devices out there, there's no reason for an Amazon to add it as an authentication method. If we start to see people actually carrying Fido devices, whether it's mobile phone enabled Fido devices, which currently the Samsung S5 is a Fido enabled device, and I suspect with Samsung being a member of the Fido Alliance, that's not going to be the last one. As you start to get large numbers of people carrying Fido devices, then the reason not to implement it as an option for your users is going to get more and more difficult to sustain.
Yeah, that's really cool. And looking at the list of partners, there are some companies that are not small bit players. I mean, Google and RSA, that's pretty huge. I'm really surprised that RSA is even considering being a member of the Fido Alliance, let alone being a full-fledged partner like this, because they create competing technologies that don't necessarily do the same thing, but they create competing authentication technologies. So it's really good to see them jump on top of this. And of course, you've got LG here, which is a large manufacturer of mobile devices. CA, which does a lot of good stuff in security technologies, and then of course major financial players. So it looks like you guys have got some real backing behind the alliance. It's good to see.
Yes, I mean RSA joined at the highest level. They're on the board of the alliance, and that I'm sure you can talk to them about their views. But it would be strange if there was a dominant authentication protocol that their server software didn't implement. I think they would find that a bad place to be. So
that's true.
Okay.
We got 1 minute, so final thoughts.
So final thoughts is there must be a better way than a password with a mixture of upper, lower numbers and special characters that you have to change every time the company you're trying to log on to loses that database. So yes, there is a better way. If we talk in a year's time, I suspect we will have numerous implementations of large service providers offering Fido authentication, and if that's right, then I think we'll be in the beginning of the post-password era.
And we are happy about that.
Yeah, I cannot wait. It is a good time to be a user.
And John, we hope again, like last year, right after Thanksgiving, to probably have you back on.
Well, I'm always here. Happy. I live in the UK. It's actually a public holiday here as well in the UK. So it's, what is it, 4:38 at the moment in the afternoon. So very, very fine time for me to talk to you.
Well, we appreciate you coming on and joining us and explaining this to us. And you're always welcome on, and we'll be asking you again on shortly.
Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you. Everyone,
Thank you.
have a good day. Have a good Memorial Day. We will see you next week. Bye.
See you guys.